So, like every once in a while, you might have a thought that passes through your mind that goes something like, okay, forget all this. I'm just going to sell all my stuff, jump on a motorcycle, and travel for as far as I can and for as long as I can. Yeah, we've all dreamed about it, but Crystal Fong actually pulled it off. For the last 2 years or so, she's rolled through almost every country in Europe on a 250cc Honda Dominator, packed with 100 pounds of gear by herself. After getting an intense 160-mile-per-hour introduction to the world of motorcycles on the back of a Super Sport down I-5, Crystal decided she'd rather be the one controlling the bike. So she got her license, discovered that all too familiar psyche-calming joy of being on a motorcycle, and the rest has been in her rearview mirrors ever since. And while it hasn't all been sunshine and rainbows for her, Crystal's made lifelong friends from almost every country. She's experienced beautiful places at her own pace, and she shares it all with us on her Instagram, making you feel a little jealous, but also happy to know that she's out there living her dream. This is Crystal Fong. I'm your host, Mark Long, and you're listening to Driven to Ride. All right, Crystal Fong, you are on Driven to Ride. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you. First, thank you for taking some time out of your adventures to be here. Let's first start by maybe what, in your own words, what people might know you for. What's your claim to fame?
People might know me for riding my Honda Dominator across Europe. I'm originally from California, so it's quite a long ways. And I had a goal to originally ride every country in Europe. There's 45 countries, and I've skipped a few: Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova.
Yeah, well, that seems like a pretty short list of countries you skipped. So,
yeah, I've ridden about 40 that I've covered. So that took quite a while. It took me 2 years.
Wow. Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. But how'd you get started riding motorcycles in the first place? I mean, you don't just jump on a bike one day and decide I'm going to ride all across Europe. So,
no, it was like a little step by little step process. So in college, my friend took me on the back of his bike. I wore a cotton hoodie with Nike Dunks and a helmet that was way too big. And we went 160 miles per hour and did wheelies and endos. And that was really fun, but very nerve-wracking because I had no control. So from then on, I decided I was going to get my own license.
Wow. Yeah. So so I just went through and said nobody really just goes from 0 to 100 on a motorcycle, but you literally went from 0 to like 160 on the back of a bike.
Not through my own choice.
Right. Now, did he did the person that you were on the back of, did they tell you that that was going to happen, that you were going to go full send like that, or were you just along for the ride?
I was along for a ride, and we didn't have like those intercoms back then, so like I'm holding on to him, and
right.
He's just grabbing my arm and like making me hold tighter, and so that's just a signal for don't let go.
Right. Yeah. Don't let go no matter what, man. So, well, that's a hell of an introduction to motorcycles, and you wanted to ride even more after that.
I did. I didn't want to let the fear conquer me. Like, oh, I touched this once. I was afraid and I'm never going to touch it again. It was this is interesting. Let's see if I could conquer this fear.
Okay. And when you first got on a motorcycle to ride like by yourself, did you take like the MSF course? Did you take a class through college or something? Tell me about that.
I was very by the rules. I followed the MSF course. I had all my gear before, and I actually dropped my bike the first day of class because I just didn't know the weight of the bike. It was a bit too heavy, and the sound of the throttle scared me.
Sure. It's different when it's somebody else is doing it, but then when you do it by yourself and you don't realize how much power you've got in that flick of the wrist, it gets a little intimidating.
It was, but when you drop a bike, it kind of messes up with your confidence, but you just tell yourself that you're in control of the machine, and that gets you over that mental hump.
Yeah. When you finished the class and everything and you were able to go out on that first ride by yourself, were you kind of hooked on motorcycles from there? Or was it, again, like a step-by-step process?
It was a step-by-step process. It was scary. I practiced my U-turns in the neighborhood. I dropped my bike. I did a lot of riding in my neighborhood before I went out into the main public street. And then from even then, it was just like, okay, I'm too scared to go on the freeway, but let's see how I do at this red light. Let's see how I do splitting lanes. Like, it was all just very intimidating for me. Like I didn't just take off one day and like, okay, that's it. Like I had to be confident of every tiny little step.
Yeah, that's the smart way to do it, and probably the much safer way to do it, because then you can take those skills and build on them from there, rather than like, oh, I'm just going to go on the highway and see what happens and split lanes, and we'll figure it out as we go along. That's one way to do it, but maybe not the best way to do it. So I think you probably did it the way that everybody maybe should do it. So you're comfortable, you're riding around, and you're riding around California and all that. Did you start to kind of take road trips? Did you go farther out, maybe do some touring? As your motorcycle experience grew?
I actually commuted for the first 8 years.
Really? Just commuting?
Yes, just commuting. And weekends, I would do some just group rides. I would never go on a trip. And my first solo tour was actually during COVID. And that's when, you just have a bunch of time on your hands. You're not supposed to see anyone. That's when I kind of got into this next world of motorcycling.
Okay. Where was that first trip that you took?
I went from California to Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming.
Okay. So that's a heck of a drive. That's a heck of a ride. Tell me about that trip. And was that solo? Was that with other people? Like, did you want to just go see the national park? What made you want to go there?
I'm an incremental step type person. So I went with a friend and we rode together, and I just love national parks. So that's always been on my list. And I was kind of looking at flights, and I was like, well, I have a bike, and during COVID, it was dangerous to fly on a plane. So I thought, what better way than to just be in my own helmet, breathing my own air. So it took about a week to get there. And you just, gosh, all those states are so beautiful that you ride through, like Idaho. Like I would have never thought anything about it, but it's just so green and lush. And so it wasn't just about getting to the destination of Yellowstone. It was just enjoying every day, just being on the bike.
Yeah, for sure. I spent some time in Idaho, and it's definitely a hidden gem. Was there a big difference that you noticed in riding in a city versus riding kind of out in the country?
Oh, it just immediately calms your psyche. Like when you don't have the honking of cars and stressed people trying to like inch ahead of you, or a pedestrian crossing your way without looking. And it's just mountains, grass, rivers, birds, animals. Like you just feel so calm. Like I'm even calm just thinking about it right now.
Yeah, a friend of mine was like, it's like riding through a painting, and that's always kind of stuck with me, that it's just very serene, and it's like you're in your own little painting, especially that eastern Idaho, Yellowstone kind of area. It's very picturesque up there. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you've had one trip under your belt. Did you take any kind of longer trips after that? Like you said, kind of going in steps here.
I did. I then rode from California to Chicago, Illinois,
Okay.
and that was a 3-week trip. So I actually did that one by myself. And that was an adventure. It was the beginning of winter. I brought my mosquito net instead of my tent because it was causing the weight of the tent was causing my bike to wobble.
Okay.
So I just ditched that, and it was absolutely freezing. I don't know what I was thinking. Like I didn't have any winter gear. I was still camping every night, and like some nights when I was just so exhausted, I just got a hotel room.
Yeah.
I would say that trip was more grueling than anything. Like, not every trip or ride is like the best inspirational ride ever. And that one, I will say, it was pretty torturous.
Yeah, but you did it. So, I mean, it sounded like it was worth it.
It was. I grew a lot from that trip. Like, it gave me the confidence that I could do solo tours by myself, and that was just a catalyst of whatever came next.
Yeah. What was maybe the biggest thing you learned on that solo trip?
This was during a time when there was a lot of political divide in the US, and I had a lot of fear that, oh, maybe they would know I'm from California and they would single me out and pick on me. But nothing happened. Like everyone was super nice. Like I remember there was this one really windy day riding across Nebraska, and people were always checking up on me, like, am I okay? Like, do you need extra bungee cords? Like, do you need a place to stay? And
Wow.
I was just like surprised. Like this was not what I expected because I had a lot of fear in my mind going into this, but it was the complete opposite.
Yeah.
So that tells me most people are good and helpful.
Yeah, I'd say most people are helpful, especially to motorcyclists. But yeah, I mean, when you're out there by yourself, you don't know what's going on, and you don't know who you're going to run into. So I think it's completely normal to be a little nervous, but that probably helped as you decided to go full send yourself and head across to Europe to travel. Where did you come up with that idea? Like, just I'm just going to go and I'll figure it out, or did you have like a plan?
Going back to the incremental step thing, like once I gained the confidence from my Chicago trip, I was like, I wonder if I could ride Europe by myself. I wonder if I could ride every country in Europe. So it was just kind of a crazy idea, not knowing if I could do it. But the only thing I knew was I was self sufficient and confident in myself. And to me, like that's all it takes.
Okay, nice. So you decided, okay, I can maybe do this. I've got this crazy idea in my head. Was there a turning point where it turned from like a crazy idea into like I'm going to do this?
I knew I was always going to do some sort of world trip. I didn't know it would involve motorcycles. I think once I bought the plane ticket, like there was no turning back. There's two major factors for me that made me completely commit. It was finding a motorcycle and buying a plane ticket. Everything else is figure outable.
Right.
And so that was like once I bought those two things, like there was no turning back.
Okay. So which one did you do first?
Found the motorcycle, of course.
Tell me about that process. I mean, did you just like look online or what'd you do?
I am never one to research anything. I just jump in and do it. So I had to do a lot of internet scouring. Like I didn't know about ADV Rider or Horizons Unlimited or all these forums. I even looked on Reddit, like how does a U.S. citizen ride long term in Europe? And it's very hard because it's hard for foreigners to own anything in Europe. Like you need like a citizen identification number, a permanent address, a bank account, all this proof that you can pay for something basically,
Okay.
and that you won't, like leave the country if something bad happens. And so there were two main options actually. So the one is this guy in Ireland called Moto Firmi, and he does this process where he buys motorcycles and like lets riders long term rent them. And then there's this other guy in Croatia that does it. I went with the guy in Croatia, and just because I was starting in October, so it'd be more south. So I was thinking about like weather.
Right.
Like I didn't want to be up north during the winter when I started.
Yeah, you learned your lesson from the Chicago trip.
Didn't learn my lesson.
Oh no! All right.
It was still cold. So I talked to this dude and he gave me a bunch of options. And so I test rode a bunch of bikes in California before I picked one. And then
Nice.
he suggested a Honda Dominator, but they're not very widely available out here. So he kind of told me it was like the medium option. So I was looking for something that was lightweight, that I could pick up by myself if I dropped it, that could carry a bunch of stuff, that was durable, that was kind of indestructible. And he told me like that bike was it. So even though I never test rode it, like I kind of had a feel of what it would be like because I test rode so many other bikes.
Sure. Yeah, the ADV kind of dual sport kind of platform, you get a feel for that, which is way different than, a traditional street bike or a sport bike or anything like that. So, what size is that Dominator again?
It's a 250cc.
Okay, so yeah, not very big, especially by American standards. I think, is it in Europe you kind of see small displacement motorcycles a little bit more?
I think it's depending on the country.
Okay.
Just due to the price, but I'd say it's still pretty mixed. There's bigger CCs that I see people riding just because, the ego that goes with them or like the power that people want, like beneath their legs.
Yeah, yeah, bigger bikes, bigger power. Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing, but the 250, a 350, any of those smaller bikes, they'll get you where you need to go. It's just you don't have that necessarily the top speed that other people have, but if you're going along the journey, you don't necessarily need it, I guess.
That's something I had to learn. Like,
Oh yeah,
I have a Ninja 300 like at home, and it's not fast by any means, but
sure.
it just accelerates so much faster than this Honda Dominator I have, and it'll get me out of like kind of like risky situations. But this Dominator, like I love it, but it's kind of like a tractor. And I just have to tell myself like, okay, we're not going to be able to like swerve out of any situations. We're just going to do it by visibility. Just let people know we're here. We're chugging along, and just that's our method of safety here.
Yeah, and you're doing it smart. But one of the things I think, too, that's probably impeding your acceleration is the 100 pounds of gear that you have on the back of that thing. What in God's name are you carrying on the back of this motorcycle all the way through Europe that weighs 100 pounds?
My life.
That's fair. But that's a lot.
It is a lot. I told myself at the beginning of this journey, am I going to give up any of my hobbies?
Okay.
And the answer was no. So I carried all of my hobbies with me. So I have a bunch of books. I have my backpacking backpack. I have hiking shoes. I have my skincare stuff. I have my laptop. I even bought a rifle case for my badminton racket, and I bring my badminton shoes and my birds with me.
Wow. Okay. I think I've heard less. I think I've heard people pack less than a Winnebago, but man, that's impressive. I mean, it makes sense if you're living your life and you're just happening to be traveling, you don't want to give up any of the things that you do kind of on a day-to-day basis. So it does make sense, but I guess it just adds up fast. When you think of 100 pounds, it's like, that's a lot of, I always think about like holding it in my arms or something. That's like a lot of stuff.
It's a lot. I have really strong traps right now.
I bet. Yeah. Have you like mastered like loading and unloading the motorcycle too with all that stuff?
Absolutely. There's a certain process. I pack everything, and I know exactly like where everything is. And it's just like, I've done it like thousands of times, and I've got it down to a science. Like, it's kind of crazy because at first I didn't even know how to put panniers on a bike. And now, I mean, like, it's probably a small thing for some people, but like, I can just see like the growth in me and my process.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the start of your journey. Like when you started telling friends and family about this, or let's say after you bought the plane ticket and bought the motorcycle, did you have friends and family like supportive, or were they freaking out, or they were like, you're insane? Maybe a mix of all three. What was the response like?
When I told my mom, I was very surprised at her response.
Okay.
She was like, go have fun, be safe, you know what you're doing. And I was like, what? And then I like reflected a little bit, and I was like, oh, this is through all the decades of me pushing my boundaries that she's realized this is just how I am.
Okay.
And I think she's seen me like, like parents worry, but when they see you like come home every day after you go out and do your ride and hang out with your friends, and you're safe. And like, I think that builds confidence in parents that,
sure,
okay, she's not that crazy.
Right.
But when I told my friends, like, they were the ones freaking out. Like, they were like, don't go. It's dangerous. Like, we won't be out there to help you if anything happens. It takes 13 hours to fly out there if we need to pick you up. So bless their hearts. They're the ones that were actually really afraid.
Interesting. Yeah. Cause I think it'd be the other way around.
You know, when you like beat someone into submission,
yeah,
that's like, that's probably how I kind of wore my mom out with my antics.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so you said that you had been pushing boundaries kind of your whole life. So were you doing that before you got into motorcycles?
I was, at one point badminton was, it was like my thing. And I spent so much time like trying to get better, playing 3 to 5 times a week. And then it became running marathons. And I just totally deep dived into it, where I would like fly across the US just to run like a marathon. And then I like got into obstacle courses, and I like cut myself up doing a lot of those and just driving all over California doing that. And then it became motorcycling.
Yeah. So really if you look at it in aggregate, it's like wanting to go travel all through Europe on a motorcycle really isn't that out of character, it sounds like.
No, I think it's just like the next step.
Yeah, just the next logical step. Well, so then you've got friends who are trying to keep you down. You got family who is supportive. Where was the first place you went? Like, how did you start this journey?
I flew from San Francisco to Zagreb, Croatia, and I rested there for about a week to like recover from jet lag. And that was also my first couch surfing experience where I just stayed with a total stranger. And Croatia was my first country. I didn't know anything about it. Like Americans go to Greece or Italy or London or Paris. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
know anyone that went to Croatia or the Balkans. And so I didn't have any like context of the country or the people or anything.
Hmm.
So that was definitely a culture shock. The Balkans are a bit different. Um, they just have a very different mentality. There's a lot of factors involved. Like the Yugoslavian War was 30 years ago.
Sure.
They're a bit separated from the rest of Europe. Not well geologically, but also the mentality is just a little different.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. But it sounds like, I mean, the people were friendly and you were able to get your bike and everything. So it wasn't like a scary experience.
No, people were so nice to me. Like, I just, there's something, I don't know, something about me and nature. Like, I always follow the national parks. So I went to Kirka National Park and I rode to, what is the other one? Plitvice National Park. And those places are just so beautiful. And everyone I met along the way, they're just very friendly, very welcoming to me.
Well, that's great to hear. So speaking of, going to these national parks, did you have a plan of like, did you draw kind of a route on a map of how you wanted to go through Europe, or did you just go there and decided to wing it?
I just totally winged it. I never know where I'm going to stay the next day.
Wow.
I'll do like a little bit of preliminary research. Like when I first get to a country, I'll maybe like look up must see places in Bosnia, Herzegovina, or something like that. And I'll like pin a bunch of things, but they're never like, I have to go 100%.
Okay.
But if I just happen to be going in that direction, then I'll like go to my pin. Or if someone recommends something to me, then I'll like put that on my Google map and I'll just like go like this throughout a whole country.
Just kind of weave around. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just whatever I feel like doing.
Well, then can you kind of give us the quick and dirty like list? You don't have to list all 40 countries, but maybe just kind of tell us the route that you took from Croatia all the way through the rest of Europe.
Yeah. So I started in the Balkans where like Croatia and Greece are. And then I went through Central and Eastern Europe, like Switzerland, Poland, and Czech Republic. And then I went up to the Baltics, like Finland, went to the Scandinavias, like Sweden. And then I went up to UK, where Ireland is. And then the last section was Western Europe, where like Portugal and Italy and Spain are.
Cool. And you are currently not even in Europe at the moment, right?
No, I'm in Morocco, which is wild. I never thought I would go to Africa.
Well, I guess if you go that way from east to west, and then you kind of come down and you're at the south of Spain, you're pretty much there anyway, right?
Mm-hmm. It's only a 2-hour ferry ride. It's so close. I had no idea. But Europe also has something called the Schengen visa. The rule is that
Okay.
Non-Schengen European residents can only stay 90 days within these countries and you have to exit 90 days out. And so I already spent like 80 days in like Spain, Portugal, Italy. So I needed somewhere to exit out of. And so Morocco was the obvious choice since it's so close.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about kind of the legal process of doing everything, because I mean, you're still obviously an American citizen. You're over in Europe for 2 years. That's a long time. Usually, like you said, there's 60, 90 day, maybe even 6-month visas. But how do you kind of handle the traveling, the visas, getting into new countries, all that kind of stuff?
It's kind of a puzzle. So not every country in Europe is in the Schengen. So there's regions you can exit out of. So for example, like let's just say the middle chunk of Europe is in the Schengen, but the Balkans, like Serbia, Albania, Bulgaria, are not. So you can exit into that region. And then once I entered in again, I had 90 days, but then the UK is not in the Schengen. So you kind of have to big picture place yourself where you'll be in the next few months so you can not get fined or banned from a continent.
Jeez. Like you just leave for like a day and then it resets, or do you have to like leave that region for a certain amount of time?
You can only stay 90 days within a 180-day period.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you have to, it's not a consecutive 90 days. You could do like 2 months here, 1 month here. But for me, it was just easier to like do blocks of time. So I wouldn't say, oh, I did 1 day, 2 days here. And plus like being on a bike, you can't just zip in and out through countries like that. It's just very long distance wise.
Yeah.
And so I would do it in chunks, and I have like a little calendar that helps me remember this.
Yeah, I got to go to a different country and hang out there for a little while. It sounds like you're spending a fair amount of time though in each country and really kind of soaking up the culture, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. In countries where I'm not so limited in the Schengen time, I try to max out the time there. So where was I? Oh my gosh, Ireland. I was only supposed to spend a week there, zip in, go back to Scotland because Scotland was so beautiful. I ended up spending like 5 months in Ireland, just
Wow.
riding. They have something called the Wild Atlantic Way, which is like, it's all along the west side. And
Okay.
it's just the most beautiful road. And so you can spend a lot of time like weaving in and out of these peninsulas. There's like hikes you can go on. It's, I just, if I could spend more time in each country, I would.
Mm-hmm.
Just because there's just so much to see. Even if you stay your whole life in one country, you can't see everything. And so being on the road, only spending a week in one country, it's still not enough.
Yeah, you barely scratch the surface,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine, even if that. So, going from like country to country, what's it like switching back and forth to different sides of the road? Is that kind of a big adjustment, or are you just kind of used to it now?
I'm not used to it. Well, only the UK is on the left side of the road. But man, when so I took the Eurotunnel. It's like an underground subway kind of that transports big rigs and trucks and cars and motorcycles from Calais, France to Folkestone, England. And I remember the first turn, I was supposed to make a right turn. So I did it a tight one because it's just instinct. But you're supposed to like overturn it and go into the left lane. I already messed up. Like, oh my gosh, like I'm not gonna make it out here. They're gonna eat me alive. But thank goodness no one was there. And you just have to like mentally tell yourself, like, okay, people are driving on the opposite side of the road. And it's a lot easier when there's traffic because you can follow people.
Oh, sure.
But, like,
yeah.
For me, sometimes I go into autopilot, and when you're driving or riding, you're kind of relaxing.
Yeah.
And so I have to think like, oh, I'm not in like my home country or like driving on the right. I have to do this conscious thing with my brain. Like, okay, bigger, wider turn, opposite U-turn.
Yeah. Yeah. Look right instead of look left.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like you're driving or riding for the first time again and really talking yourself through it.
It is. It's like, for me, I can feel my brain rewiring.
Yeah. It's definitely weird. Driving on different sides of the road aside, what are some big differences too that you've noticed between riding in the US versus riding in Europe?
Oh my gosh. Some countries ride really, really crazy. I'm going to say Italy, Greece, and France. So I'd like to think, and I will say that riding in the US, people are a bit more respectful. So like they pass on the left-hand side. They don't really like cut on the right side where there's bicyclists,
Okay. Yeah.
But oh my gosh. Like some of these countries, they'll just go whichever way, sometimes on the sidewalk, sometimes the opposite side of the way. And
jeez.
Sometimes like on the median, like, so there's like incoming traffic and like your traffic, they'll be like splitting lanes in the middle. And at first it was very intimidating. but if everyone else is doing it, then I'm going to do it too. And it's just faster.
Yeah, yeah. I saw a video that you had posted. I can't remember which country you were in, but it was you were behind a bus, and there was some guy on a motorcycle or a scooter or something behind you, and he just whips past you and goes right in between like these two buses, and I like tensed up from seeing it on video, so I can only imagine what that was like in person.
I mean, they're reckless and they're on scooters too. So they have like no
Yeah.
fear. And oh my gosh, these Greeks, these are like the funniest scenes. So, I'm all the gear all the time. Like I'm fully armored up. And these guys, they have their like helmets slung on their wrist. They're like texting with one hand and they're like smoking with another hand, like all while riding. And I'm like, these guys are
Right.
so skilled. Like you should never talk down on scooter riders anymore. Like they're faster than some of these bigger 600cc bikes and how they ride. Like they're like born out of the womb riding scooters.
And they're probably in shorts and sandals and like a short sleeve button down going to lunch or something like that. It's just, they don't care.
Yeah.
It's so wild. So wild. So have you met a lot of other riders and made a lot of friends like along your travels?
I have. It's kind of cute. Like I didn't know anyone before I started. I didn't have a network. And now I have friends all over the place. My network is heavily badminton and motorcycle friends.
I'm sure there's a lot of crossovers there on those concentric circles.
Not at all. Not at all. But if I see like motorcyclists on the road, I want to make motorcycle friends in every country. So I'll kind of follow them for a little bit and see if they pull over. And then I'll like pull over and be like, hi, my name's Crystal. And I'll just awkwardly put myself into their friend group.
Have you gotten good response from that? Are people pretty friendly?
Yes. Everyone's so nice to me. Everyone's super welcoming. They think I'm crazy. They're like, are you here by yourself? And I'm like, yes. And we just become friends.
Yeah. It must be nice to be able to get, not only take in the culture, but to make friends and kind of get a citizens or a resident's view of the country and maybe some good roads to see and a little bit of an insider's perspective, I imagine.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think forming community is very important everywhere you go, even if it's just temporary. And that way you can really understand what it's like to live there, not just as a tourist, staying in resorts or anything. When you have like a sit down conversation with a local, like it's just one of the best feelings because they're letting you into their world.
Yeah, that's super cool. And that's, I think, something as tourists, sometimes people don't take the time to do. It's more just to see the sights and say that you've been there and then go home. And you're really, like I said earlier, you're soaking it up and enjoying and seeing how big the world really is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think something for me is like, I don't want to just take when I'm traveling. Like, I don't want to take your resources. I don't want to just eat your food and leave. Like, whatever conversation I have with someone, like, I want to take some of that with me. And like, I mean, it's an equal exchange, right? Like, they're learning from me, I'm learning from them.
Sure.
And that's something I carry with me because a lot of people don't have the ability to travel. And so when I talk to people and there's biases or assumptions from every country for another country sometimes. And I can actually stand up and say, no, they're actually not like that. Like, this is what I experienced. And it's kind of like word of mouth, sharing other people's culture. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool. And that sounds very special. Has there been a place or a country or a region or anything like that maybe you had some misconceptions about and you were maybe pleasantly surprised by?
Absolutely. I had received a lot of warnings about the Balkans, and that's like the lower kind of southeastern region of Europe.
Yeah.
And I was told it was very dangerous. Like a lot of other Europeans were like, oh, don't go there. It's dangerous. And it's not. Some of those were true during the Yugoslavian war 30 years ago. And, there's a lot of bad things that happened during the aftermath of war. There's a lot of psychological like issues.
Sure.
And, those were big problems back then. But I don't know, how many months did I ride it? Like 6 months. people are so friendly. Like some of that is still in their psyche, but people want to move on and create better lives for themselves. And so when I'm writing, I have all these, it's kind of like warnings of safety and like well wishes of a certain region. I have that in the back of my mind. So these people give me fear, but when I'm physically there experiencing like the sights and sounds of the country and people being kind to me, like they're just totally clashing all the time. And so that region, it's a hidden gem, and I really recommend everyone visit it because it's just so beautiful. Like there's things there that you would never see in another country, and the cultures and the food, like it's just everything.
Put it on the list. Gotta go. Gotta go. You've talked about kind of surprises that you've had from different countries or different regions. What's maybe surprised you the most about yourself, maybe in terms of going from somebody who planned a bunch to maybe somebody who now just takes it day by day, or just being able to roll with the punches? Kind of what's been the thing that surprised you the most?
I was surprised how adaptable I was. Going from a planner to not planner to me was a really big thing. Like I thought I would freak out and panic.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's kind of being put in survival mode where you don't have a choice. And I don't have anyone else to rely on except myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of tests adaptability, but also how self-sufficient you are. And I was surprised how quickly I adapted. I'm not sure why I adapted so fast, but that was definitely something that surprised me.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you've grown a comfort, or you've grown comfortable being uncomfortable, and whether that's probably from athletics or running marathons or anything like that, those skills or that adaptability probably changes over. So, but yeah, I'd be surprised too. Like you just throw yourself into the situation and don't have a mental breakdown.
I think that's a good way to put it. Being comfortable in the uncomfortable. That's something. I mean, that I spend a lot of my life doing. Like it's not just physical; it's also mental too. Like self growth and trying to be a better person, or just being well read in certain subjects that maybe I'm not the best in. It's just not just physical for me. It's like also psychological. So that's a good point.
Yeah, no, I like it. I guess from a practical standpoint, you said you've brought all this stuff with you, obviously, and your laptop. Are you like working as you're traveling, or like how are you sustaining yourself?
I'm not working.
Okay.
I'm completely living off savings. So I knew I was going to do a big world trip someday, but also like, when you live in society, like there's a certain path you follow.
Right.
You get married, you have kids, you have a wedding, you buy a house, you buy a big car. And so I thought that was going to be my life. So I was saving for something. Little did I know I would be saving for this.
Okay. So, I mean, that gives you probably even more time though to see the sights, to connect with people, to enjoy the ride a little bit more, because you're not spending at least 8 hours a day in front of a computer,
No, definitely not. And that's something I had to unravel in my mind, like the theory that in order to be successful, you have to have an output, such as like producing something for work. And that's something I really struggled with the first, like, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 months. Like, I would have anxiety of just like spending my savings and not having money coming in. And I had to really undo that and tell myself, like, it's okay that I'm spending money, money will come and go, but this experience is a once in a lifetime thing. I'm not going to be able to redo this again. And so I still struggle with that sometimes. Like, oh my gosh, I've spent so much money the last 2.5 years. Like, I'm going to have to start from zero again once I go back to society. But that's definitely a choice I've made, and I've accepted it.
Well, and like you said, I mean, you can't really put a price on those experiences and those memories and all that. So, I think it takes a lot of guts to do that. So kudos to you, man. You've conquered Europe, almost all of Europe for that matter. Chilling in Morocco right now. Do you have what's your next step? Are you planning on maybe touring Africa, some other region? Are you going to come back to the U.S.? What's your plan? I mean, for somebody who doesn't plan.
Africa doesn't really call me right now. I'm here to reset my Schengen visa from Europe,
Okay,
but I'm actually going to be heading to the Middle East. Like that region calls me.
cool.
So the border from Morocco to Algeria is closed. So I'll have to go back up through Europe and cross over through Greece to get to Turkey. So that's my next plan. And as far as the Middle East, I don't think I want to put the same pressure I put on myself in Europe to have to visit every country. I'm just going to flow with it, maybe max out the amount of time I'm allowed to spend in each country and just go really slow. I have this idea where it'd be really cool to learn horseback riding in Turkey. I don't know why.
Well, I mean, you've got the time and the opportunity, and it sounds like when you put your mind to something, it's going to happen.
Absolutely.
So do you have any plans to come back to the US at all anytime soon, or are you're still just rolling?
I'm still just rolling. I don't have any plans to come back. Um, my life is out here for now. The more time I spend away from home and friends and family, the further I kind of drift away. Like my mentality is different from who I was in society.
Hmm.
Uh, so that's also another struggle I go through. There's definitely some mm, severing from the old me to who I am now.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's 2 years of travel is going to change you in a lot of different ways. So it makes a lot of sense. Um, do you have any advice for somebody who maybe wants to take maybe not like a 2 year trip, but maybe like a, I don't know, casual summer trip, or maybe even a month-long trip in Europe or somewhere abroad?
Oh yeah, I would say save,
Hmm.
set a deadline of when you're going to leave, and just do it with fear.
Interesting. So even if you're nervous, just do it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I I wanted to backpack Europe when I was younger, so that's kind of like the seed that was planted with this trip.
Okay.
And then I looked up one day, and 10 years has passed, and I didn't do anything. So that's why I say like set a due date of when to leave,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
that way it's more concrete and not just a someday I'll do it thing.
Yeah. It helps you commit to it, I imagine.
Hmm. Hmm.
You said originally you thought about backpacking through Europe way back in the day, and you did this on a motorcycle. Now, what about doing it on a motorcycle has made it really special for you?
Well, for one thing, you can get to places a lot faster than your own 2 feet. And there's a lot of freedom that a motorcycle provides. Like if you're on a tour bus or you're on a plane or you're hitchhiking, you're limited to whoever is in the driver's seat.
Right.
But when you're on a bike, you're the one making all the decisions. And so if I'm riding and I thought I was going a certain direction, but I see like a cool mountain over there, like I'll go to it. And I have my tent, I'm totally self sufficient. And if there's no hotel or hostel, like I'll just camp. And it's just so easy to be able to carry your house and your food and all your necessities in like just one snail shell.
Right.
It's just the absolute freedom. And then, there's like subcultures of different things. Like you can be into knitting or you can be into like scuba diving. Motorcycle people, I feel like, are the best. And like being able to meet so many different riders with the same passion all over the world, even though you don't speak the same language or have the same culture, it's amazing because you have a common ground of your passion, which is it's just very powerful.
Yeah. I mean, if they're friendly enough to let some rando off the street who's followed them say hi to him and be friends with them, that's a testament to friends in Europe and the friendliness in Europe. Um, so last thing, you have been also documenting your journey as you've been going along. How can folks kind of follow along with you? Where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm most active on my Instagram, chasing.crystal, same as on Facebook. I also have a blog, chasingcrystal.com.
Nice. And are you on YouTube as well?
I was making videos and I do have a YouTube channel, but I haven't uploaded in a while. It's just very time intensive to have a desk with good internet and like be concentrated for like 10 hours. Like I'd rather be writing.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Crystal, Fong, thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's a hell of an adventure. I know quite a few folks who are probably thinking, man, wish I could just drop everything and go ride indefinitely. So I think you're living a lot of people's dreams. So
I'm living my own dream.
Couldn't say it any better than that. So thank you for being here, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for listening to Driven to Ride. Interact with us and check out full unedited conversations, photos, interviews, video interviews, plus other goodies on YouTube or Instagram at Driven to Ride Podcast. Or you can check us out at driventoridepodcast.com. And make sure you leave us a rating and review from wherever you get your podcasts too. If you have an idea for an episode or a guest, or you want to invite us out on an adventure, email us hello@driventoridepodcast.com. Driven to Ride is wholly owned by Flint Rock LLC. Made possible with help from Matthew Miles, and written, hosted, and produced by me, Mark Long. We'll see you out there.